We studied the last time we met, and we talked about dreams and how that people can't control their dreams. Of course, Joseph was, through a gift of God, was able to interpret dreams. The ones he had, the ones the other people had. Remember, he interpreted the butler and the baker, who had dreams that seemed to be pretty well similar, but they weren't, because the butler was restored to his position as the Pharaoh's cupbearer, but the baker he was executed. Now we have Pharaoh himself is having dreams. Now Pharaoh does tell what the dreams are. Later on we run across in the Old Testament, run across a king who, I'm not going to tell you what the dream is, because then you tell me what dream I had. And of course, Daniel was the only one that was able to tell him what dream he had. But here Pharaoh has two dreams. Of course, the one is of the fat cows coming out of the river, and then the skinny cows coming out of the river, and the skinny cows eats the fat cows. And then they have the grain. It's the seven. I think the old King James would be 7 ears of corn. Is that what it says, Janice? What's the problem with that? They didn't have any corn in Egypt at that day and time. Corn was over here. But they didn't have any corn in Egypt at that time. But they did have grain. And anyway, the 7 fattest kernels or groups or whatever of the grain was eaten up by the poor ones. Yes, sir. Yeah. But anyway, the 7 bad years ate up the 7 good years. And that's what Joseph interpreted the dream to be. And so God allowed Joseph to interpret these dreams. And Pharaoh was so impressed with the interpretation of the dream that he made Joseph second in command over the whole country of Egypt. And Egypt was most probably at this time the most powerful nation, the most advanced nation that there was in the world up to that date, up to that time. So remember, we talked about Joseph. Even then, through all the troubles he had, everywhere he landed, God prospered him. But God had planned on this all along, because God had planned on the famine, and he planned on Joseph being able to take care of God's family, the people of Israel, and to save them from starvation, because God had planned on this particular famine, and it was a very intense famine. Now, if you study about Egypt, when does it rain in Egypt? Huh? Yes. Yeah, Euphrates is a different area, but
rained in Ethiopia.
There you go. Now you're getting closer, yeah. The last time and it's been a while, the last time I studied anything about the geography of Egypt, it's still that way, and about 10 miles on either side of the Nile River is still able to irrigate when the river is running, and that is green. And once you get on either side of it, it's strictly desert, because it just doesn't rain. If it does, it doesn't rain enough. Well, anyway, at this day and time, evidently, God, the rain didn't come in Ethiopia. It didn't rain enough that they had anything. They still had water in the river, but not enough to irrigate with. And so not only did they have a famine in Egypt, but they had a famine all over the rest of that area. Because in the land of Canaan, where Jacob, or Israel, as he's called this time, they ran out of anything to eat too. They still had stuff stored up. Remember, because he sends on the second trip, they send a gift of different kinds of nuts and honey and whatever. So they hadn't used up everything, but there's nothing for the cattle to eat, nothing for the sheep or the people to eat, so they have to go after grain. But Pharaoh places Joseph over everything, and they store up all the grain for 7 years. They build great storehouses to put the grain in. What person in the New Testament do we hear about that talks about building storehouses for grain? Didn't work out for him. What did happen to him? He died. What's the difference, you think?
He was doing it for himself.
He was doing it for himself. Joseph was doing this for God, and it was going to save all these people.
You're going to say what people?
Not only the Egyptians, but also the Israelites, who were God's chosen people.
Right? And it was going to position God's chosen people to become a what?
Over 1 million people, a great nation. I believe you can mathematically figure out when they left. Depending on which place there are about 75 of them whenever they get to Egypt, and they leave. If you add up all the different tribes, I think you can figure up there's at least 1 million people.
But all of that's put in place to get them in Egypt where they can build them a nation.
Yes. Why did we're getting way ahead of ourselves on the Israelites, but why did the Egyptians say, because they were sheep herders, the Israelites was, why didn't they, they said, well, give the land of Goshen. What did the Arabs, or Egyptians, excuse me, what did they think about sheep herders?
They didn't care for them.
Worse than that, it's an abomination to me. I think it says to be a sheep herder. Huh?
Kind of like pigs with the Jews.
Yeah. But anyway, the famine hits. Pharaoh has given the authority to Joseph, and they have stored up all this food. And and it's kind of a double-edged sword on this food deal. They tax the people by making them give the food, and then whenever the dry weather hits, what do? They sell it back to them. They sell it back to them. And Joseph is over all the sales. They sell it back to them. So that's kind of a bad deal. They had to give it to them in taxes, and now we had to pay for it to get it back. Maybe that's where some of these governments have come. They got their model. But anyway, Jacob sends his sons down after to buy some food. He sends money with them. They've got money, just nothing to eat, or not enough to eat. And Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph at all. Because why would they not recognize Joseph?
He looks like an Egyptian now.
He looked like an Egyptian now, didn't he?
He was a child. He was just a young teenager.
Young teenager?
Now he's a grown man.
What else might be involved in here?
He spoke the language.
He spoke the language?
He didn't want them to know him, so he kind
He didn't want them to know. Okay, he wouldn't speak to them in Hebrew. He could understand it, but he didn't speak to them.
As far as they're concerned, he's dead.
As far as they're concerned, he's dead. Also,
Says he disguised himself.
he disguised himself. What was one thing that the Egyptians did that the Egyptian men did that the Israelite men did not do? They shaved their heads and their face. Now the Israelites later on they took different vows and shaved vows, VOWS, and shaved their head, but the Egyptians they shaved their face. And in fact, when you study about whenever Pharaoh sends for Joseph to get him out of the prison to interpret the dreams, that Joseph puts on clean clothes and he shaves. He cleans up. But the Israelites, they don't shave their beards. And so that makes one. But they did not recognize him. But he knows who they are. He asked them lots of questions. Well, is this all of you? There's 10 of them. No, we still got a little brother at home. We got another brother he's no more. He's gone. And her father's still alive and what have you. And so he sends them back. And what happens? He puts their money back in their sacks, doesn't he? But he keeps one of them because he accused them of being a spy. And he said, you gotta bring your little brother back with you if you want any more food, and then I'll turn him loose. But Jacob doesn't want to turn him loose. And he's the youngest one. And well, he doesn't say he's the son of my favorite wife, but he implies it. Because that's what she was with his favorite wife. He plays the favorite card all the way down the line. Jacob does. But they finally send him back. Let him go back. You'll find when you get over that as they find which chapter I'm even in now. Chapter 43. That Joseph brings them to his house. They think we're in trouble because of different things, and the money being in the sack, money being put back in the sacks and what have you. And then they have Benjamin with them, and they eat lunch. And now here we have, this is where, remember, we get in the New Testament, the Jews won't eat with the Gentiles because that's an abomination. What does it say here? The Egyptians wouldn't eat with the Hebrews because to the Egyptians that was an abomination. See a pattern here in all of civilization? We're better than you because we're not one of you. That basically, and that's always been a pattern of all civilizations. We are better than you are, and that's what's caused many wars, caused lots of prejudices and discrimination among different people. We're better than you because we're not one of you guys. We're not one of the sheep herders, or we're not one of this guys, or one of them guys. There's been civilizations built upon this promise that we're better than they are, and we're going. Hitler was that way. He didn't like the Jews. He didn't like the Gypsies. Basically, he didn't like anybody that wasn't German. But here, the Hebrews, the Egyptians did not like the Israelites, the Hebrews. But Joseph finally makes himself known to his brothers. And you notice that during these times that they meet before he tells them who they are, so dreams he had come true, and that his brothers bow down to him. It's been several years. Joseph is about 30 years old now. He's like I say, well, he said a while ago, he's a grown man. He was a teenager evidently whenever they sold him into slavery and convinced their father that he died of an animal attack. Verse chapter 45 says, Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, and he made everybody go out from the room. And said there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. What mine says. What does yours say, Janice?
Which verse is it?
Chapter 45, verse 3.
3. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doeth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence.
They were what?
Troubled.
Troubled, yeah. Yours says terrified.
Mine says dismayed.
Yeah, mine says dismayed, but I think terrified is a better description of the word used here. Because, here,
He went from being sold into slavery to being a man of authority.
yeah, we kicked him to the curb. We got rid of him and sold him into slavery, and he's the boss, and we're here, and he's the next thing to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh is king, and is it quoted? They were in his mercy, and they were quoted an old movie deal. It's good to be the king. Well, the king had ultimate authority. And the only person in the land that had more authority than Joseph did, and that was Pharaoh himself. They were terrified. Man, look what happened. We thought we got rid of him. So Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. But Joseph had figured it all out, hadn't he? Even though you didn't mean to help God out, you actually helped God out. God sent me here. And at this time, he says the famine, verse 6, the famine's been here 2 years. We still got 5 more to go. We've all endured dry weathers. We've all endured grasshoppers. We've all endured, different things, and we always hope, well, maybe next year won't be as hot and dry and have as many grasshoppers this year. But Joseph already knows we got 5 more to go. God sent me here. Verse 9 says, hurry up and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. Don't you know this was quite a shock to Jacob's system? You know, like I say, he played the favorites pretty bad. You know, and Joseph was his favorite son at the time. And, and he thinks he's dead.
Hey, Virgil,
Yes, sir.
before we get too far ahead of it, twice he says, God sent me here,
Yes.
and yet I can't recall any point in which God said, Joseph, go to Egypt. It was through his providence that,
Yeah.
that he
Yeah, I
was
see.
in there, but Joseph was completely convinced that it was God's word that put him.
Yeah, he figured it out. You know, he thought that it's got to be. He never quit worshiping God. He never quit believing in God, and then by this saving by interpreting the dreams and saving all these people from famine, from starvation, he figured out that's my purpose in life. That's what God sent me for.
Well, sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we have little doubt that God is involved in some type of decision or placing us in a certain place, at the right time, at the right place, with the right people, and all.
Yes.
May not realize it's what it's done, what we've done in the past.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes we think it. Joseph must have at times thought, boy, God's really been punished me for something, because look here, But
If you think right, the dreams that Joseph had when he was a boy, this kind of explains
yes.
those dreams.
It explains those dreams, yes. But it's taken close to 15 years or so for the dreams to come true, and if he hadn't forgot those dreams, now that's what that dream was all about. That's what that dream was all about.
Well, all these times that his brothers bowed down before him on their first trip down there.
Yeah.
On their second trip, you think that didn't run through his mind?
I guarantee you it did at that time. That's when he figured out, that's what that dream was all about right there.
I think it also shows the forgiveness.
Yes.
I mean, he could have, what y'all done to me, y'all don't need nothing.
Yeah, you got,
I come head back home. But
either that or you guys, we're gonna make some bricks out here after a while, and you guys get with it,
but I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
Okay?
he forgave them, yeah. Yeah, we're busy.
We sing a song that says something about, you'll understand it all by and by.
Yes. Tempted and tried, I think, that's how the song starts out. I'm not sure if that's the name of the song or not, but that's how it starts out. We'll understand it all by and by, yeah.
Yeah, but it's quite evident that he has already figured out God's long-term plan for the
Yes.
family.
Yeah,
You're down, I'm down here, so you can be down here. And, all this is part of God's plan.
yeah. I've got the authority, you just come on down and whatever you need, well, we're gonna take care of it,
Virgil, in verse 7, and God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by his great deliverance.
Okay, yeah. What does that mean to save your posterity?
The lineage.
Lineage, yes. In other words, you and your kids aren't going to die. Y'all going to, your kids are going to keep living, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to have kids. They're going to, because if everybody dies out, then your descendants are gone because there is no descendants. That's the reason. They said it was God's custom, and in that day and time, if a man died and didn't have any kids, and he had some brothers, and the brother was supposed to take that woman for a wife, and the kids wouldn't be registered to him, they registered to his brothers, so that his brother's descendants wouldn't stop there. It would keep going.
Well, and we have another one that was sent to be killed for great deliverance as well.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Jesus was sent to be a king for our deliverance. Just as Joseph wasn't necessarily king, but he was next guy in line. You know, he did all the decision making and everything. If Pharaoh just turned it over to him. You know, if you got this much pull with God, well, you just take care of things.
Well, like Joseph was in a hole, so did Jesus. And
Yes.
Come back, like Joseph is now in charge.
Okay, that's good, yeah. Next week, we'll try to start on chapter 46.